Proportional Response. Book 1, Chapter 2, One Word, Proportional Response. Prime Minister Kilintar walked to his lectern and looked out over the council chamber of the League. He carefully avoided looking at the human ambassador lest he show weakness in an impotent threat display, and because, today of all days, he did not need attention called to the human. The thought of the humans curled his lip slightly, however, and he inadvertently favored the entire assembly with a harsh glare. The various ambassadors from the many races fell quiet under his gaze. A few fidgeted. Good. His efforts to mitigate his nephew's failure a few weeks ago were having an effect. It had been a simple assignment. Storm into the human embassy, shake his tail around, cow the human ambassador, and get an apology, maybe even some concessions. Instead, Renfrew had allowed himself to be cowed, had practically been bodily ejected from the human's domain, and his admission had cost them 2 colonies that they didn't have the strength, yet, to take back. The effect on the other ambassadors had been annoying and profound. One of them even had the temerity to smile knowingly at Renfrew's back. Kilintar had made a few examples here and there, applied some leverage, delivered a couple of carefully circumspect beatings, made some threats. Now, he saw all of the aliens sitting at attention, waiting for him to speak. He smiled to himself and nodded. These people needed to be reminded which species ran the League from time to time, and he'd done that well. On to other matters. He pushed a button on his lectern, and every door to the council chambers closed, hard, and locked. A few of the ambassadors looked satisfyingly startled as the bolts in the doors behind their booth slammed home, even though they expected it. He refused to react as the rising high-pitched whine of the privacy field spun up out of audible range. With the chamber secured, he spoke. Esteemed ambassadors of the civilizations of the League, I come to you today to call the most solemn vote that we, in these chambers, are required to cast. As of now, I must invoke Article 19 of the League Charter and call for a secret session of this council. The only recording of this session will be encrypted so that it can only be played by... He continued to read the script required for these sorts of meetings, though he hardly needed the prompts. The ambassadors sat in their booths quietly, some feigning attention to the boring formality better than others. He finally reached the end of the formal declaration of secrecy and began in earnest. We meet to perform the most burdensome duty, but we act to ensure the safety of all our civilizations and our progeny. The survey of inhabited world X2652, called Vintus by most of its native tribes, has been completed and the conclusion is undeniable. For the record, I will state and explain. The world is classed as 11011.5, Class 1 habitable, with breathable atmosphere and survivable gravity. The highest level species is a Class 10, fully sapient and self-aware. The world is Class 11.5 on the competitive, divided by hostility versus cooperative life index. The planet has been deemed a death world. Most heads made the appropriate grim nods, and somber or grim expressions showed on nearly every face in the chamber. Kilintar took careful note of the few faces which showed anger, or worse, some sort of guarded distaste. Every such face belonged to a suspected or known human ally. Kilintar locked eyes with the Venter ambassador, whose face held a slight smirk. The man's eyes met his and held his gaze, and that smirk stayed in place. It took all of his self-control to keep his tail from lashing back and forth in frustration as he broke eye contact. The nerve! No Venter had ever dared to challenge a sultan, so he obviously needed another lesson, possibly a permanent one. He raked his gaze across the gathered ambassadors again before he spoke. We will now take on our most solemn duty and proceed with 2 votes. The first will be whether to authorize the confistration process. The second will be to select the race, which will be tasked with carrying out the unfortunate duty of ensuring this dangerous species will never threaten the civilized, gentle races of our peaceful league. A light blinked on his podium. The human ambassador requested the floor for a point of order. He studiously ignored both the light and the human and quietly tapped the deny button without looking. A microphone cut into the address system and he had to move with unseemly speed to cut off the humans' ability to address the League. Soon, he promised himself. They would deal with the humans soon, and the Venter for failing to properly castrate them. For now, the next possible threat had to be quelled. Voting will be carried out in randomized order, and given verbally, as is required for this, our most somber duty, though the race of the Prime Minister will be registered first, as the articles require. He looked up at Jalat, the woman sent to replace his idiot nephew, and refused to allow his grimace to show on his face. That seeing her required him to look up rankled. The booths of the League's 5 founding races sat above the Prime Minister's podium, a fact every man whose claws had graced this lectern tried and failed to change. The scales on the back of his neck started to rise at the smug look she gave him. Prime Minister and Ambassador always belonged to the same clan. Always. Yet, there she sat, not only from another clan, but from a rival. What were those idiots his clan put in the Senate back home doing? How could they have allowed the clan to lose that much power? No matter. Yet another matter for another time. He put the thoughts down and bent his mind to the task at hand, while fury reigned within him. Therefore, I call upon the... No. The word rang through the silence of the council chamber. A low collective gasp rippled across the assembly, and Kilintar's eyes narrowed. The word had not been shouted, but amplified, which meant that either his controls governing the sound system had been hacked, or a forbidden amplifier had been brought in. One, and only one of the lesser races would dare interrupt him so at any time, much less have the unmitigated gall to interrupt a confistration vote. His lips peeled back from his teeth, and he barely suppressed a snarl. His mind ground the words in fury. The human